Crime Book Club. I am here with Simon Michael to talk about the Charles Holburn books. So, Simon, do you want to introduce yourself and show off the books?
My name is Simon Michael. For those who've never heard of me, I was a barrister for 37 years. The first half of my practice working in the Old Bailey and most of the other big criminal courts, doing murders, muggers, burglars, blackmailers, you name it, every sort of villainy, both for the defence and for the Crown. And then I retired early to pick up a writing career, which started in the 80s and currently looks like that. So I now write, I've written 8 in the series. They're all based upon my cases that I've done or cases that I've come across, or bits of one and another, like a jigsaw. And they're based in the 60s in the very corrupt Metropolitan Police of that time, the Cray twins and the Messina brothers and the Richardsons. So that's me.
Now, you say the corrupt police at the time, but you do have a good balance in your books. You have some really, really good guys who can't be coerced and can't be kind of cajoled into doing things or threatened into doing things. And you also have corrupt police as well. And there's obviously grey areas between the two. So you do have a good balance. It's not all black and white.
It isn't. I like to think Charles, my hero, who started off as a bit of a villain and then becomes a barrister and is fighting the villains from then on. I think, I like to think that he tries to stick to the straight and narrow. But the truth is, when I started at the bar, it was like the Wild West of British justice. There were, although the Greys have been in prison for a short while, most of the London was divided up into the areas where each gang had made its money from protection or prostitution or illegal gambling was still going on. But a huge swathes of the Met were corrupt. People think it's bad now, but it was appalling at the time. Everyone's heard of the Sweeney, haven't they? Well, they were still putting members of the flying squad into prison in the 1980s, up until 1986. Those that they could get their hands on and hadn't gone to the Costa del Crime with their mates. And most people know that the Sweeney was involved with skimming off the profits. So if they recovered bullion or money or drugs or cars, some of it might go to the police property store, but a fair amount of it would be shared out amongst members of the team. And then there was the Dirty Squad. They were the obscene publication squad, so you can see why they became known as the Dirty Squad on the street. When their job was supposed to be to get rid of the 2 principal pornographers who more or less ran Soho, guys called Humphreys and Silver. And they found it was a much better idea to enter into a license agreement with Humphreys and Silver, whereby they took 10% of the profits. And when the Dirty Squad was bust, which it was disbanded in the end. Almost every member, not all, but almost every member was found to be taking envelopes stuffed full of dirty fivers from Humphreys and Silver to look the other way. So it was.
You must have.
It was incredible, and the stuff that I was dealing with on a daily basis involved, coppers bending the rules. For example, when you watch something like one of the big crime ones, the
Line of Duty.
Say again.
Line of Duty.
Thank you very much. Line of Duty, very good example. When someone's being interviewed, you will watch them put 2 tapes into the machine and press the buttons simultaneously, so that the interview is recorded and one half goes to the person, the solicitor, whose bloke's being interviewed, and one goes to the police, so everyone has the same record. Well, it didn't start until 1984. I've been at the bar almost a decade by then, and before then, there was absolutely no requirement to record any interviews. So they used to make it up. If they decided that you were the guy, or you got away with one the last time, they would make it up. And it was so well known, there was a term of art called a verbal. To verbal someone, the verb, was just to put in their mouth a false accusation, a false confession, which they were then going to court, and all of them would take out their pocketbooks and just read out this identical alleged questions and answer in which a confession had been made. I had a case where I was prosecuting, in fact, and I had a series of 6 witnesses, police witnesses, all go into the witness box and say, he said this, he said that, complete, total confession. And I was convinced we were going to win. The jury were going to find him guilty within minutes. And then defense counsel managed to point out that one of the things that the chap had admitted to hadn't actually occurred at the date of his interview. The police had forgotten the order in which they got the evidence in and had slipped into his false confession and admission to handling certain items which hadn't actually been stolen at the date of the interview. So that used to happen all the time. So the corruption was endemic throughout the Met. That's why I find it such a fascinating period to talk about. So I like to think that my hero is one of the very few guys, Charles Holborn is one of the few guys who is doing his best to keep by the rules, but he is dabbling in a sea of excrement so far as the coppers and the gangs are concerned. Sorry, I apologize for that.
I asked you just before we went live, would you write in present day?
I would certainly if I had a good enough idea. And in fact, I do have the beginning of a good idea, I think. But I prefer that period. The 60s is a fascinating period. I mean, the sort of pre-war deference to authority was gradually breaking down. But when people think of the swinging 60s, what they're thinking of is sort of 1966, 67, and so on onwards. The early 60s, it was, certainly in the major cities, there were bomb sites everywhere. People still had rationing. It was grey, it was poor, it was hard, and it was over the course of the next few years that gradually attitudes changed. But it was a time of enormous societal change. This sex, drugs, and rock and roll coming across the Atlantic, and I think it's a fascinating time when you watch that deference breaking down, and the emergence of teenagers as a societal and a financial force, which they weren't before. Teenagers didn't really exist before then. So I find the 60s a really interesting time. I like my detectives actually to detect. I don't like them relying on, DNA evidence and mobile phones and computerized technology. I think in those days they had to understand human nature better. So that's why I prefer that period. But never say never, as they say. I had a good enough idea, and I've got something sort of working away in the back of my head, which involves a body and a boot, which shouldn't be there. So,
well, that's enough to grab your attention straight away.
Yeah, I had this picture in my head. If you imagine someone driving along wet streets, it's at Christmas, and the neon signs are reflected back up off the tarmac. And it's just an ordinary guy, and he goes to get some last minute things on his way home from work. Maybe it's Christmas Eve, and he goes to put them in the boot. He opens the boot, and there is a naked woman tied up in his boot, and he has no idea why or who she is.
Well, that would be a memorable event.
Yes, I think so. I think it's an interesting idea. So I am plotting that out gradually.
That would certainly grab my attention.
Yeah.
To start to open a book and that be the opening scene.
Yeah, good. All right, well,
because he's throwing in an awful lot of questions straight away.
Yeah.
Is she in the right boot?
Yes.
Does he know her?
Is he the victim?
Put her in the boot? Yeah, why is she there?
The question I've been asking myself is he the victim of an attempt to set him up for something? Has he seen or done something which he shouldn't have? Or is it a complete error? Has somebody just made a basic mistake of putting it in the wrong boot? And I like that idea. But then, of course, I've got to get him involved. I know there may be other crime writers listening to this, but I've already set this idea out to my agent. So you can't pinch it.
And the thing is, though, so on Sunday we're having a Winterfest in the book club, And one of the panels that we're hosting is, I've actually got the book behind me, The Guest House. We've got 3 books called The Guest House. They're all very different ideas, but they're all based on the same premise. So there's every chance that even if somebody was going to go, with just the idea that you've come up with, you're not going to write the same book.
Yes, perhaps. Are each of the 3 books, they're all novels, they're not short stories based upon the same?
All novels.
Wow.
All different things happen to different people, all very different situations.
And did they come out at the same time, or different years?
All within 18 months to 2 years of each other, I think.
Because The Secret
there's quite a
Barrister,
few.
you've heard of The Secret Barrister. Have you heard of it? Yeah. Well, he has also just produced a book called Nothing But the Truth, which is my most recent one. So, and I suspect I'm the beneficiary of people buying his book by accident, or buying my book by accident, thinking it's his. So I'm not complaining.
Absolutely don't complain. No, that's a happy accident.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell us where the idea for Charles Holborn came from, because he is a fascinating character. And I was saying to you before we came online that I've just read book 8, ready for talking about it tonight, but I loved it so much. I'm going to go back and start from the beginning and work my way through. And I'm intrigued to see, because you said how much he's changed as a character throughout the series. And I really like him. I think he's a good guy. I think he's got himself into a couple of situations that anybody could find themselves in, with the right circumstances, without saying too much. But I'm interested to see how he was when he started, because you can see that there's been a character arc just from this book. You can see from things that you've referenced just how much he's changed.
Yes, I am. Well, he is largely me. I mean, there's a fair old bit of autobiography there.
Okay.
His family dynamic is very, very similar to mine. And my family grew up, they were in the East End for 500 years. And so I come from quite a very modest background. So I modeled him on me to some extent. And of course, they're some of my cases. So that fitted. I wanted to go back in time because I love the 60s, but I also wanted to use the East End stuff more. I wanted him connected to the Krays, which he is throughout the whole of the series. One of the things that interested me is I read quite a lot of books based in the 60s, and attitudes to women were very different. They were supposed to stay in the home. Men controlled pretty much most things. Women had to have permission to go out to work. They had to really fight to have a career. And even though they may not have been unpleasant people, men tended to treat women as second-class citizens. I mean, think of Mad Men, for example. And the fight.
I haven't seen it, to be honest.
Oh, you've got to watch. It's brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant.
I've heard really good things about it, but I spend all of my time reading.
Right. Well, if you have time,
I'll put it on my list.
Yeah, it's amazing. It shows you it's shocking now when you witness the way that women were, men would think nothing of patting a woman on the backside as she went past them in the office. Everyone did it, apparently. I mean, I was only 7 at the time, so it wouldn't have happened to me. But nonetheless, women were treated really poorly. Not leaving aside the fact they had to fight to get careers, and even when they did, they never got decent jobs, and the glass ceiling was really low compared to where it is now. So I wanted to write about. I've used a lot of my family history. There is a connection with the Krays in my family history, and I wanted to use all that. But I wanted to make Charles a man of his time. And the first time I read the first book, and he came across as such a misogynist. I thought, no one's going to like him. You've got to make your character at least partially likable. But at the same time, if I'd written him as a man of sort of 2020s, his attitude would be all completely wrong for the period. So I had to start with him being, I hope, a nice guy, but nonetheless the product of his time, and gradually bring him up to date so that he's acting more like a human and less like a Neanderthal by the time we get to the last book. And I hope I've managed to do that, and so that he's still a person of his time, but he's not dislikable. So
I liked him very much.
I'm pleased. I mean, I've always loved the books, like the Raymond Chandler books, where his heroes are trying hard to be honest, to follow an honest and lawful path, to do the right thing.
Mm.
You know, they're surrounded by everyone who is basically doesn't care about the rules. And so I've always been fascinated by the idea of a man sticking to his own moral code, even when he is facing what appear to be insuperable odds. And in the case of of Charles, because he's a barrister, he's got to stick by those rules. But as you may have noticed, without any spoiler alerts, he's not disinclined to, he'll bend them if he has to.
And he'll say what he thinks, and he really he has a strong opinion, and that's not a bad thing. That is a very, very good thing in his situation, to know his own mind and to have strong opinions and not to be willing to let people do things they shouldn't.
Yes, I think it's partly the way he experienced prejudice as he grew up. I mean, when I went to the bar, there was enormous racial, religious, and class prejudice. And I ticked every single box. To be able to qualify at the bar, I had to take time out. I worked as a council labourer. I believe I'm the only barrister ever who's started their professional life as a council labourer. I had to make enough money to pay to get to do my first year of my degree. I worked. I bullied my neighbours to let me wash their cars and cut their grass and so on. And having got to the bar by an enormous amount of hard work. I mean, I was a working class lad who had, by virtue of working really hard and very sharp elbows, I'd got to this sort of fantastic, prestigious, established profession. And I thought I was going to be judged by my intelligence and my integrity and my hard work. And I found I couldn't have been more wrong than that. There was huge prejudice. And it took me a very long time to get started. In fact, I took every wrong box. I had a rough accent. I hadn't been to public school. I was the first non-public school boy allowed in those chambers. And there were no women. I say school boy, there were no women until the mid-80s there. I hadn't been to the right universities. I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge. I didn't belong to the right clubs or go to the right balls. I didn't know the Lord Lieutenant. And I had the wrong religion. Didn't matter that I didn't practice it. There was huge anti-Semitism, and I just simply came from the wrong side of the tracks. So I think I've always had personally this very strong belief in justice, because I felt that I faced so much injustice, as I know that others do now. In those days, when there were no black faces at the bar, or perhaps one or two. Very, very, very few, and no more than a score of women out of 5,000. So and I've put that into Charles. I think like me, he's got a very strong feeling about justice, and will go the extra mile to get it for his clients.
I'm reminded of a scene. Is it the Moot? Is that what it's called? Where you have
yes,
the Moot. Okay, and I believe that the young woman. It's just reminded me of what you were saying. There was a young woman. I believe she was Nigerian.
Yes.
In the book, and he said that you hoped she wouldn't be judged on race and the fact that she's female. What you wanted her to be judged on is how sharp-minded she was.
Yeah, but I didn't have any expectation that she would get a fair crack of the whip.
Yeah, and that was what you kind of pointed out in the book, and that's just what that's made me think of. It's nice to see. It's nice to see Charles in these small moments that they're not necessarily connected to the whole book, but they move him on and develop him as a character, and they show little insights into other parts of the job as well.
Yes. Well, there will be. There's a lot of that earlier in the series, so you will see how he responds to prejudice, not only aimed at him but at others. I mean, at the time when these were written, homosexuality was against the law. Men would go to prison. and he
it's just so bizarre.
It's difficult to imagine now, but in one of these, he represents his cousin, who is his closest relative, who is gay, so there's quite a lot about prejudice, not just religious, but also racial and prejudice against people who are in any way different. So I'm glad you saw that. I don't belabor it. They are crime books. I mean, they're the legal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But nonetheless, I was writing about a time when this stuff existed, and I was the victim of it, and I wanted to say something about that in my books.
Well, you cover it beautifully.
Thank you.
You really do. And I really am looking forward to going back and starting the series from the beginning. You were saying that book 8 was going to be the last one, but is that not the case now?
Well, you will see that he resolves his issue with his family as well. I won't go into how, but he resolves that. And in fact, in 1969, the Cray twins did finally get sent to prison. And as you'll see from the historical note at the end, all the stuff about their trial is exactly what happened. And the way in which they were caught is exactly what happened as well. So that finishes off that part of it. The 8 books do make a complete arc. And so I thought I would have a break for a while from him. I've got 2 other books out on submission, which are completely different, and I'm writing a third, which is completely different. But I honestly have had so many lovely, lovely reviews of the last one, and emails, and people who've written to me through my reading list in my reading club saying, please don't make it the last one. And one lovely lady said, I worry about Charles when I'm not with him. I want to know what's happening to him. And she said, she said, I think about him and his family a lot, as if they're real people. So please, let's have another one. And so I'm beginning to think that perhaps I should do another one. I
think you should, yeah.
I spoke to Amy Durant at Superior, who is my publishers, and I said, what do you think? If I had a little break, would it be okay? She said, yeah, come back to us. We'll be open to that, even though the contract's now in it. So we shall see. We shall see.
Hi, Kaz. Hi, Donna. Kaz wants to know if we've got any festive traditions.
Do I have any festive? No, not really.
Not really sure that I do. I must have. No, I do. I do.
Because
had to really think about that.
We used to do Hanukkah, but my kids are not Jewish, and I didn't. I wasn't very fussed about it. So we used to have a thing called Christmacher, where we rolled them all in together. And so that will involve not only turkey, but some of the Jewish staples. I'm Jewish only in terms of my diet.
Right, okay.
I like bagels and cream cheese and smoked salmon and chicken soup and so on. So that's about all. But no, other than that, no particular tradition. I do exactly what everyone else does. I eat too much, probably drink too much alcohol, and I watch too much telly.
The thing that we do in my house, and it started with me as a child, and now I do it with my children, we watch certain things on Christmas Eve. So it started with Father Christmas, the Raymond Briggs book that was adapted. It's what do you call when you draw it? What do you call that? I can't think.
What, when you're filling in the colours?
No, for the adaptation for TV.
What, the cartoon?
Yeah, cartoon. Yeah, the word was not coming. The word wasn't coming at all then. So I've always watched that. That came out when I was a child, I think just before I was born. So I've always watched that. And then The Snowman came out, so we added that in. And then The Snowman and the Snow Dog. So at 3 different times on Christmas Eve, we gather all together, and then we let them go off and do their own thing in between. But we gather all together and watch the different things. And we finish with Father Christmas and then send them all to bed, which is harder now they're older because my eldest is 19. So trying to send them all to bed when they are not wanting to go.
Well, you'll have to bring in new films, new Christmas films that are more age appropriate. and that will
No,
start a new thing.
no,
No?
I refuse. No,
Okay. Well,
not unless they make more in the series.
I've made my kids watch It's a Wonderful Life with me. And
I have never seen it. I don't know how I've missed this. I know you're looking horrified. Other people are throwing things at the screen right now. I've never seen it.
It's one of the most wonderful films ever made, and certainly the best Christmas movie. It comes to either first or second in every poll of all filmmakers and other film buffs every year. It's wonderful. I howl, I cry like a child watching it every time. In fact, we went to see some people who I didn't know very well. My other half knew them. Went to Scotland to spend Christmas with them, and they were all busy talking about their school days in the kitchen because they've known one another for years and years and years. And I couldn't take part, so I went into the other room and started watching this, and was sobbing within about 10 or 15 minutes of the beginning. And their teenage children kept looking around the door at me, going, "What's he doing?" Because they hadn't seen the film either. They just couldn't work out why this bloke was crying on his own in front of the television. But it's wonderful. It's the most heartwarming. It's a wonderful, wonderful Christmas movie. You must.
Okay, it's on the list. We've got some time off school and uni and college holidays, and I'm taking about 4 weeks off from interviewing. So, I'm being told off now. Donna's telling me it's the most beautiful.
Thank you, Donna.
Absolutely. And the snowman is not creepy. Oh, okay. Kaz is asking, what's been your read of the year? Do you have a favourite book from this year that you've read?
Yes, I probably do, actually. Well, I'll show you, in fact.
While you're grabbing that, mine was The Storytellers by Karen McKinley, which is just gorgeous. Absolutely loved it. I've seen it make a few different lists, top 10 lists. So congratulations, Karen. What a book that is.
I have read.
Look how neat your office is.
Yes.
Mine is not neat.
I read Treacle Walker by Alan Garner, which was shortlisted for the Booker. It didn't win, but it's poetic and magical and beautiful. And I got into Mary McCarthy, who wrote The Group. Now, these are written ages ago in the 30s, I think, or maybe even earlier. But it's the way in which she understands women. It's just amazing, just fabulous writing. And they're all about women and women's relationships, but I love them. And then there's this science fiction by N.K. Jemisin. She's won every award there is, just every award there is for these. And they are, if you ever wanted a lesson in world building, and I've one of my books out at the moment is science fiction, or they call it cli-fi. It's climate change fiction.
Okay.
And I wanted some guidance on how to build my world, and I read these, and it's like taking a degree course. She's just brilliant, just brilliant. Again, and with a women protagonists as well. So I've had basically the whole of this year, I've been reading women's fiction, or fiction written by women, which is interesting.
Donna's saying she's slightly fangirled because Bonnie Garmus replied to her tweets. So Bonnie Garmus wrote, I can picture the cover. Chemistry. Oh, somebody's going to shout at me now. It's on the table in the other room, so I can't picture it. I can't think what it's called. About 5 people are going to type it all at once. I want to talk to you about Charles's family, in particular his parents. But saying that, I didn't. So they based on your parents?
Yes. Charles is extremely dysfunctional.
Thank you, Mills. Lessons in chemistry.
Yeah, Charles's relationship is essentially, his dysfunctional relationship is based upon my relationship with my mum. And in fact, that last scene in Nothing But the Truth actually happened.
Okay.
I viewed writing it as therapy. So, yeah.
We can't really discuss that.
No, we can't. But let's just say that Charles suffered from a very, very difficult Jewish mother who did not approve of his life choices, as mine didn't approve of mine. And so the fact that I wasn't going to follow their religion, the fact that I married somebody who wasn't Jewish, the whole thing. In Charles's case, his parents, they call it sit shiva. That means to sit 7 days of mourning. They tear their clothes, they say prayers for the dead, and from then on, they act as if he had never existed. My parents didn't go quite that far, but they went far enough. I was outcast from my family for a long time because I wouldn't basically follow the route that my mother wanted me to follow.
That must be quite a difficult thing to write about. Had I realised, I never would have prepared any questions about Harry and Millie.
Oh, don't worry. I don't mind. It's fine. I viewed it. I don't know how many other authors do this, but over the course of the 8 books, I mean, it's been better than years of therapy. It's getting out.
Lots of people tell us that.
Yeah, and I feel that that's one of the reasons I was happy to stop writing the books then, because I kind of felt it was over. I'd exorcised those ghosts. But no, that's all true. My father, like Harry, was a quietly spoken, easygoing, lovely bloke about whom I had never heard anyone say anything bad in the whole of my life. And my mum was beautiful, elegant, intelligent cow. She was horrible.
Got to admit, you can't help but be a little bit in love with Harry.
Yeah,
he's just lovely, and he adores his wife no matter what anybody else thinks. I mean, the way he looks at her, everybody needs somebody who looks at you the way Harry looks at Millie.
I'm glad that came across, Sam. Thank you.
I told you I love the book.
Yeah.
There's so many just little details.
Oh, good. I'm pleased. I try and write about real people, because throughout my practice at the bar, I was dealing with real people, even though in the most shocking circumstances, rape or murder victims or whatever it may be, they were still real people, rounded people who, and even, I mean, there are some exceptions. Some of the guys who I defended for some really horrible crimes, all the ones I prosecuted for that matter, I never detected any humanity in them at all. They were like, they used people as objects. But the vast majority of people who commit crimes have got home lives and children and mums and dads. And so I wanted to write about real people, which is why I was so absolutely assiduous about never taking liberties either with the law or anything else. I wanted to make it as true to life as possible, which is sometimes, I know that lots of people love things like Agatha Christie, for example. But her plots are brilliant. There's no doubt about it. They are brilliant, and they're like a very complicated puzzle, like a Rubik's cube. All the parts all move together. You've got to get it exactly right to make it all fit. But I don't feel that they're about really real people, rounded people who you sympathise with. I used to get quite a lot of emails about Corrupted, which involves a very, very bent policeman.
So what number is that? What number?
Number 4.
Okay.
But who loves his wife a lot and is very caring of his wife, and I think that's entirely true. Even bent coppers love their mums. So, and that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm really glad it came across like they were real people. Really.
You use that line in the book as well. Duke has rung and left a message with Barbara to get Charles to call him, and she's not impressed that he's had a private call, a personal call at work, but it was for an emergency situation. And Charles is describing Duke, and he says these things about him. And then he says, "And he loves his mum." And Barbara just softens then and chuckles and kind of shoos him away. Those little details just really bring it to life.
Thank you. I'm really pleased it worked for you. Really pleased. I'm chuffed about the book. It's currently got a 4.7 average rating on Amazon, which is she's pretty good for just under 200 reviews. So I feel as though I've ended the series with a high. If it's
I
it.
will be one of the people emailing you to say, are you doing book 9 yet? Have you started it yet?
Well, I've told everyone who's emailed me so far, I've said to them like, to join up on the newsletter on my website, because I never send anything out unless it's about another book. So you would get to hear. I'm now going. I'm hoping to record the rest of the books in audio as well. The just done number 3, and it'll either be me or it'll be the original actor. But we're in negotiations over that. So there will certainly be more Holborn, even if there isn't a new book in the next short while.
And we've got hi from Mike Raven. And Donna saying, Mike, tell Sam to read Lessons in Chemistry. I have got it out ready. It's just that I can't read anything else now until Sunday night when we finish recording for the year. And then I can start on the other books that I've got. So leave me alone, woman. So Mike wrote this. Taking my life into my own hands, touching the books, we know that. But this was The Botanist. This is my second favourite book of the year. It's fantastic. Don't tell Mike, his head's big enough already. But yeah,
Okay.
see, it's starting to fall over. No, Mike's well aware what a fan club he's got here. So
okay, I'm going to make a note because I haven't come across that one. It's what's it called?
The Botanist by M.W. Craven.
Okay.
So it's excellent, and there's some gore and things. I mean, there are some gory scenes in your book.
Not very good.
Not massively, but there are bit of a description of how somebody was murdered at one point. But you imply more than you say.
I don't like lots of blood and lots of I hate that. I really don't like, and maybe because I'm just a softie. I don't like books where typical book where you've got the young woman chained in a cellar and the water's rising and she's been sexually abused and the guy keeps coming back and she's going to drown and I don't like that. I came across that, and maybe it's because I came across that sort of thing in my career.
Yeah, when you've lived through experiences of other people. Yeah. It's not quite the same as reading it in fiction. Me and my youngest daughter were talking about this the other day. She kind of has heard about some true crime things, which I'm not entirely happy about, but then I'm reminded the things that they learn about at school, and I think maybe I'm being a bit oversensitive because she's my daughter. But I think I'm far more inclined towards crime fiction than true crime.
Yeah. Well, these are an interesting blend because they involve the cases that I was involved with, or that I came upon, or that were. I mean, in the case, let's see, where is it? Yeah, the Waxwork Corpse. That was number 5 in the series. I think a lot of your members of the club will know that case. It was the newspapers. It was called the Lady in the Lake, and it was
a
pilot killed his wife and dumped her body in Wastwater, which is the deepest lake in the UK. And I got to meet that guy. And in fact, actually, that's a story in itself, because I won't tell you how. After he came out of prison, I wanted to write his story. And I went down to, by then he was running a B&B in the West Country. And I went down to see him. And it was a day in the late 80s of huge storms. Must have been 88, I suppose. Maybe it was 88. Yes, I think it must have been 88. And I went down, and because it was a B&B, and I thought, well, I'll have a weekend off. And my wife and I went down with our baby, who was only about 8-10 weeks old. And there was a huge storm, and trees were blown across the motorway, and power is out for most of the southern part of Britain. And we eventually got moved off the motorway, which because there was a pylon across it. We were directed by the police across fields and through little narrow roads, country roads, and we arrived in his village with all the lights out, including the traffic lights. There's one set of traffic lights in the middle, and they weren't working, and there were bushes. It was a bit like when watching tumbleweed blowing across the road, and it was really, really creepy. And we went and knocked on his door. I was down there to talk to him about his case and take some further evidence from him. And there was this sort of we saw this lantern approaching through the window of the glass of the front door, sort of swaying, and there was this very tall, very skeletal man who invited us in. And Elaine she was creeped out right from the start. She said, I don't know, there's something wrong about this. I don't like this at all. And he offered us some soup, and Elaine said, I'm going to put Kay down, the baby. So she went up to the room, and I was starting to talk to this guy sitting in candlelight. And he got more and more involved in telling me the story of what happened. And I suddenly had this realization that I was sitting right opposite from this murderer who had killed his wife in really, really unpleasant circumstances. And there was no such thing as mobile phones then, and the phones were out. And if anything happened, we were really vulnerable. And I went upstairs, and Elaine had jammed the chair under the handle of the door to let no one in. And she said, I can't stay here. I can't stay here. I'm too scared of him. And we did a bolt. We just ran out and left the place.
I can't believe that you were going to stay there. Strikes me as very unusual behaviour, Simon.
I think I was a bit too lackadaisical because, it's my job. I meet people like that all the time, but I have the barrier of my wig and gown, and they're sitting opposite me in a prison cell, and there's prison guards outside, and I've got my solicitor with me, and I was too relaxed. I went down. I realised that
just a smidge.
Yes. And looking back on it, the idea of taking my wife and baby to meet this murderer, yes, I didn't think it through, but I was so desperate to get the story, and I did, and it's a great, and I love that story. I've changed it because I can't. I promised him I wouldn't use his personal circumstances because he had youngish children at the time. So I've changed it to make it not a pilot, and it's a challenge. But I had his permission to do it. But it was an interesting experience.
Sounds like it. It sounds like the opening of another crime story.
Yeah, it makes a good story. But I was the thing about it. I don't know if you know it, but his wife was underwater for nearly 10 years before he was caught.
No, I didn't know that.
Wastwater is a sort of this U-shaped, because it's carved by glacial action, it's U-shaped bottom. The bottom third of it is just covered in silt. And he believed that if he if he got his wife in there, she'd never be found. And on the way up to Wastwater, having killed her, he put her in the boot of the car. And on the way up, he took his dinghy from the shed. And on the way up, he found a part of a curbstone. Under curbstones, there's usually a circular thing that takes the water. So he got that in the car as well. He got out to Wastwater and it was completely pitch black. He blew up the dinghy, got the wife, tied her up to the curbstone, popped in the dinghy, rowed out to the centre of Wastwater in the pitch black. If you've ever been there, you'll know that unless there's some moon, you can't see your hand in front of your face. There's no lights.
Right, okay.
He got her into the water without capsizing and went back, and that should have been that. But what, unknown to him, there is an underwater, like a tooth erupting from the side of the Wastwater. It never breaks the surface. It's always below the surface throughout the year. It's called Tiffin's Rock. It's like a finger pointing up. It's only it would be 1,000,000 to 1 chance that if you dropped something into the water, it landed on top of Tiffin's Rock. But he did. He managed to land her right on top of Tiffin's Rock. If she'd landed there and stayed there, the warmth of the water would probably have meant her body would have deteriorated. But she rolled down just a few feet and landed on a ledge where the water is maintained at between 0 degrees and 1 degree centigrade throughout the year. And when you leave a human body, anyone listening who wants to take notes on how to dispose of a body,
we are not giving tips.
If you put a human body into water of that temperature, it is perfectly preserved. It becomes adipose, wax-like.
Okay.
And so her features were completely and beautifully preserved. She was like a waxwork dummy. Even so, she should never have been found, because the only people who knew about Tiffin's Rock were the local diving fraternity, because they used to use it for night dives. They used to swim out with their lamps on and swim out to it and come back. It was there like a test to see if they could navigate in the dark. And a short while before, another young woman had gone missing on a walking holiday up in the lakes, and the police were out looking for her. And they were going around all the pubs and the clubs and showing a photograph of this young woman who'd gone missing. And they go into the Waswater Diving Club with this photograph, and they go around to every table. And they happen to come to a table where there's another young woman who had her first night dive a short time before then. And she'd been swimming out to Tiffin's Rock with a light on her forehead. And she'd reached out to touch Tiffin's Rock to just basically turn around it. And she disturbed a load of silt, and it was all sort of, the water suddenly became very cloudy. And if you imagine a light on a headlamp on high beam in the fog, you can't see anything. So she waited just for the silt to settle again and looked down and realized she was looking into the face of another woman. And she told her diving instructor that she'd seen a woman down there, and the diving instructor didn't believe her. He thought she had the bends. He said, no, you were much deeper than you usually are, and you came up too quickly, so it's nothing. And she said, no, I know what I saw. So when the police came in and were showing everyone the photo of the woman who'd gone missing on a walking holiday, they went up to this table, and the young diver said, I'd never seen that woman, but I'm telling you, there is a woman down at the bottom of that lake because I saw her face last week. And so nearly 10 years, nearly a decade after she was put in, the police divers had no choice but to go out and look, and they found the body of the wife. I won't describe to you what happens when you take an adipose body and put it, you drag it out. It doesn't, put it nicely, it doesn't stay perfect for long.
We've had a conversation with an author who conducted an experiment to see if something would work in her book, Jane Isaac. And she buried, I believe it was a pork shoulder in concrete in her garden. But she wasn't aware that when once you break the concrete to see if it stayed intact, as soon as oxygen comes in, decomposition starts very quickly.
Yes.
She dug this up in the middle of summer while all the neighbours were having barbecues. Yeah, you can guess how that went. So yes. We've got a bit of an idea. Yikes, okay. So did they manage to get a photo of her before the decomposition started?
Yes.
Did the divers manage to document?
They were very easily able to identify her. Her clothes had been largely preserved. She was wearing clothes from the period. She wasn't a very nice lady. She used to have affairs with lots of people, and she used to rub her nose in it. And he got away with it for ages by saying that she'd gone off with one of her boyfriends, and she had so many boyfriends, and all the villagers said, "Oh gosh, she was screwing around a lot, and she rubbed her husband's nose in it. We don't know how he put up with it for years, but thank God she's gone off with one of the boyfriends." But they found her in the very clothes that she'd been seen in that afternoon, and she was identified relatively easily. I won't tell you whether or not he was actually convicted of murder. You'd have to read the book for that, but it's a fascinating story. It's a brilliant story. I came across that one while I was sitting in a robing room waiting for a jury to come back. When barristers are sort of hanging around waiting for their juries to come back, we just tend to say, what case have you been on? And I came across the barrister who'd been dealing with it, and he held the whole room spellbound as he told us about this case. So after it was all over, I got in touch with the solicitors to say, do you think he would mind if I went to interview him? And they said, not only would he like to be interviewed, but here are the case papers. And they sent me.
Oh, wow.
I've still got them here in a big box labeled The Queen Against Hogg, including the photographs and the path lab reports, everything. Because he was quite anxious to get what I think he thought was his story across. So, yeah, fascinating stuff. So, as I said, they're all based on real cases and real political events of the 1960s, and it sort of follows. So, if everyone, people have heard of the Profumo affair, for example, that gets a look in one of them. I weave historical facts and real cases with Charles and his career and his family. So I try and put him in the moment.
I'm going to say as well, I also enjoyed the transcripts. So there are some court transcripts, there are some police interviews that are read out in court, and yeah, I enjoyed that aspect as well, giving that a slightly different way of putting information across, but just kept it interesting.
Thank you. Yes, I try and make it as realistic as I can. So most of the books have got actual documents. Names obviously changed and so on, but there'll be pathology reports and there'll be witness statements.
Yeah.
The other documents which a barrister will use or a court will use during the course of the case. I keep it short and I cut out all the boring stuff because I'm aware that people who aren't lawyers are not interested. But the evidence, I mean, there are a lot of people who spend their time just going to courtrooms to watch cases. At the Old Bailey, there's usually a queue around the block for big cases.
Wow.
Because the drama is so powerful. So I think it's good to keep that interplay, especially the question answer.
Yeah.
So so there are real documents involved, but I cut out all the boring legal stuff. I hope.
Donna said, "Isn't adipose hard? Doesn't it need to be cracked?" Now, Donna's done a forensics degree this year. Correct me if I'm wrong on the title of it, Donna, but I believe forensics.
It is
this year.
hard, and if you grab it, it turns to powdery.
Oh.
So for example, when there's one of the statements describes trying to take her wedding ring off, which had an inscription on inside it, and basically the finger just sort of crumbled away, like Tutankhamun, I suppose. So yes, so she didn't melt. She just, everywhere she was touched, every time they tried to move bits of her, they just turned to dust or to like gravel. So yeah.
Oh, that answers your question, Donna. I'm not sure that's what you were expecting. I keep catching sight of this. I look like I've got some sort of weird filter on my face. My camera broke just before we came on. So anyone who's thinking Sam looks a bit odd tonight, that's why. Odder than usual. Mike's saying read lessons in chemistry. Really funny, really good, lives up to the hype. So, okay, I have got it ready to read. I've literally got the hardback on the table, but I just haven't picked it up yet. So I will. I keep trying, but when you read for interviews, you just kind of stick with the books you have to read first, and nothing else gets in between. There's no way until the Christmas break and then try and fit a few books in. What have you got next on your reading list?
Who, me? Well, when I'm writing, I try not to, I can't read too much.
Yeah.
I get cross with myself because I get really involved in someone else's book. And then I sort of think, oh, for heaven's sake, this is something somebody else has created. Put it down and get on with it. And I'm very bad. When I get involved with someone else's book, I can ignore my own writing. So I haven't got anything. I've got a very large pile of books to be read, but I am deliberately not looking at them until I get really moving with this one. Once I've got the first 2 or 3 chapters out of the way, it tends to sort of take off, and I can then turn back to it and read at the same time. But when at the beginning, I don't know if other writers are like this, but if I've got something I can do to stop me from getting to it, I will. When I was at uni, I'd go prowling around the flat that I shared with 3 other students with a duster and a can of polish, and they go, all right, Simon's got revision to do, because I always find something to distract me from what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, my house is never cleaner than when I've got something that really needs to be done.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you handle in real life, in real professional life, as well as in fiction, social media and the impact that the news has on ongoing cases, because often something will be reported and people will take it as fact when really it's either speculation or nonsense a lot of the time.
Yeah. Well, I think
how does that impact cases?
Judges are required to give a warning to juries to say that they advise them against reading. I mean, it used to be ignore the newspapers and ignore any television reports because they always get them wrong. But I don't actually think it's possible nowadays to isolate people from everything that's going on in social media. And it does worry me that people take their news, and especially involving cases where they're trying to try the evidence, it's almost impossible to prevent outside influences coming into the jury room. I mean, the judges always give the same warning: don't discuss this with anyone outside your number, because they'll start talking and then they'll offer an opinion, and then once that opinion's been heard by you, it might affect something that you would think. So don't discuss it with them. But 5 minutes on Twitter. I mean, the courts and the criminal cases are not supposed to be supposed to be reported, but people who've been watching tweet stuff, or they do Instagram stuff, or there's something on TikTok. It's very worrying. This is worrying, but you can't lock a jury up for the period of a trial and put them all in hotels. And in fact, even that wouldn't work. You can't require them to hand over their mobile phones either. So, difficult, very difficult. Another reason why I like writing about 1960s crime, because none of that happens.
It's quite disturbing. Now, I won't go into any specific things, but just a general comment. It's quite disturbing how much people will think they know a person based on things that they have watched, things that they've seen, maybe even a documentary that the person has starred in, and they will absolutely demonize the person based on nothing that they have themselves seen or heard. They've not witnessed themselves. They're looking at other people's opinion of somebody and really vilifying them for it.
Yeah.
And that's so disturbing.
It's one of the reasons I'm really not keen on social media. I mean, I think this is partly my age, I'm sure. But I think if I could uninvent it, I would. I think it does huge damage. And all these keyboard jockeys who can say exactly what they want without any comeback and can destroy lives with it. And I hate it.
Yeah, I agree.
But most publishers require you to have a following nowadays. One of the first questions you'll be asked when they're thinking of taking on your work is, how many Twitter followers do you have? How many Facebook people, how many people have liked your pages on Facebook? And it's just part of the world now. You can't avoid it.
Yeah, I do sometimes think I wouldn't have Facebook if it wasn't for the UK Crime Book Club. I probably wouldn't have social media. I don't like the fact that my children come home from, the various educational establishments, and whatever's been going on through the day just carries on. There's no there's no escape, is there? It's constant.
Yes, whatever's going on in the playground keeps going on in their bedrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, we do take mobile phones away at certain times of night, with the youngest. Can't really do that with the older ones, but they don't tend to have the same issues. So I've just realised that it's just about to go 8 o'clock. So we've been talking for an hour. I've not really touched any of the questions that I've written down, really. I've kind of touched on a couple, because this has just been such a lovely conversation.
Well, I'm glad.
So thank you very much.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you. If you wanted to send me some questions, I'd be very happy to answer them in writing. When you could,
we'll just get you back on. We'll just get you back on when I've read more of the Charles Holborn books.
That'd be.
So there you go.
Okay.
Win-win. Thank you to everyone who's commented. Sorry, go on, Simon.
I just said have a great Christmas. Somebody's commented what? Oh, authors and students procrastinator extraordinaire. I agree, Donna.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Donna, I think you'll really like these books. I've only read the last one, book 8 so far, Nothing But the Truth. But I'm going to go back to the beginning, because I've just loved meeting Charles so much. And he's fantastic. And we've not even really touched on anywhere near as much of it as I'd have liked to. So, you can come back and we'll talk some more.
Okay, thank you. It's probably my fault for wittering on.
No, this has been great. And I will say as well, your email address for people who want to order signed copies, info@simonmichael.uk.
That's right.
Which I've got written down at the side of me.
Yeah. And I will post them out. I carry the cost of the postage and the packing, so they are pretty much the price they would be on Amazon, or if you order them from Bookshop and they came to you that way. But this way you get a signature. So if anyone would like last minute stocking fillers, let me know.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed, Sam.
Donna's off to Amazon.
Okay.
You'll really enjoy it. You really will. We've got very similar tasting books, so she's going to love the book 8. And just start at the beginning, Donna, and we'll work our way through together. I know. Thank you so much. I look forward to next time.
Yeah. Thank you.